Tombstone, Arizona Territory. 1889. By the time Clara Whitmore stepped from the stagecoach into Tombstone, Arizona Territory, she had already lost the life she thought would last forever. Her husband was dead. Their cattle ranch was gone. Their savings had almost disappeared. And beside her stood her 8-year-old son, Eli, holding the only toy he had managed to keep, a small wooden horse with one broken ear. Clara stepped onto the dusty street and looked across Tombstone. Horses crowded the hitching rails. Wagons rolled through clouds of dust. A blacksmith's hammer rang in the distance. Men hurried between the mercantile, livery, and saloon, while women moved beneath the wooden awnings with children close beside them. "Mama," Eli asked quietly, "are we staying here?" Clara looked at him. "I hope so. You said that in Benson." "I remember. And before that?" Clara swallowed. "I remember that too." Eli looked at their worn carpet bag. "Do we have enough for supper? Enough for tonight?" It was almost true. Clara had enough money for food, but not enough for another night at the hotel. That morning, the clerk had looked at her black dress and then at Eli. "Sorry, ma'am. We don't have a room suitable for a child," Clara had heard the same answer from a boarding house the day before. A widow without money was unfortunate. A widow with a child was inconvenient. She refused to let Eli see how much that hurt. She entered the mercantile and approached the woman behind the counter. I'm looking for work." "What kind?" "Cooking, cleaning, sewing, bookkeeping. I can milk cattle and work around a ranch." The woman looked toward Eli. "And the boy?" "He stays with me," the woman hesitated. "Most families want someone without children." Clara nodded. "I understand." She walked back outside. She stopped beneath the porch and closed her eyes. She would not cry. Not here. Then a man's voice came from behind her. "Your boy hungry?" Clara turned. A tall rancher sat beside a dark bay gelding. His clothes were plain. His boots were dusty. His hat was faded from years beneath the Arizona sun. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out 2 biscuits. He held them toward her. Clara immediately shook her head. "We cannot accept charity." The rancher looked at her calmly. "Didn't say it was charity. What is it?" "Breakfast." He glanced at Eli. "I made too much." Eli looked at his mother. Clara hesitated. The rancher smiled. "Take it before I eat both." Eli accepted one. "Thank you. What is your name?" "Eli." "Well, Eli, that one's yours." Clara looked at the man. "What is your name?" "Thomas Reed. Are you from Tombstone?" "Outside town. I run a cattle ranch east of here." Clara hesitated. "Do you need help?" Thomas studied her. "Maybe." "What kind?" "Someone who can cook." "Can." "Someone who can keep a house." "I can." "Someone who understands children." Clara looked at Eli. "I understand one very well." Thomas smiled. "I'll be at the livery until noon." He mounted his horse. "If you're still looking for work, come find me." He rode away. Eli watched him. "Mama?" "Yes?" "I like him." "You don't know him. He gave me a biscuit." Clara almost smiled. "That isn't enough to know a man." Eli looked at the biscuit. "It is a good beginning." At noon, Clara found Thomas at the livery. He offered her $8 a month, room and board. "Room for my son?" "Yes." "You're certain?" Thomas looked at her. "Why wouldn't I be?" Clara studied him. "My husband died in January." Thomas's expression softened. "I am sorry." "He was thrown from a horse." Thomas nodded. "Mine nearly killed me once." "What happened?" "I learned to listen when a horse says no." Clara laughed quietly. It was the first real laugh she had given in weeks. Thomas smiled. "Good. I was hoping. You still remembered how." She accepted the Reed Ranch stood several miles east of Tombstone. It was modest but peaceful. There was a wooden house, an old barn, a windmill, a garden, and cattle grazing beyond the fence. To Clara, it looked like a second chance. That evening, she cooked beans, potatoes, and salted beef. Eli ate quickly. Thomas finished his plate. That was good. Thank you. You're welcome. For the first time since her husband's death, Clara felt something she had almost forgotten. Peace. The weeks passed. Clara worked from sunrise to sunset. She cooked, she cleaned, she planted vegetables, she repaired clothing. She kept the ranch accounts. Eli spent his mornings around the barn. Thomas taught him to brush horses. You don't force trust. Thomas told him, how do you get it? You earn it. Clara heard those words from the porch. She remembered them. Thomas never treated Eli like a burden. He never treated Clara like a helpless widow. He simply gave them work, shelter, and dignity. Slowly, the ranch began to feel like home. Then Clara discovered something wrong with the books. Thomas, he entered the kitchen. What is it? You're losing money. No. You think you're breaking even. She opened the ledger. Silas Mercer has been charging you for transportation and feed deductions that don't exist. Thomas stared at the figures. How long? Almost a year. His jaw tightened. How did I miss this? You were watching cattle, and you were watching numbers. Yes. Thomas looked at her. You may have saved this ranch. Clara smiled. Then you owe me. What do you want? A fair price, Thomas laughed. That I can give you. Mercer was not pleased. He came to the ranch a few days later. You're making a mistake. Read. I don't think so. You'll regret crossing me. Mercer looked at Clara. So the widow is keeping the books now? I am. You should stay out of men's business. Clara met his eyes. I was asked to do a job. Thomas stepped forward. That's enough. Mercer smiled coldly and rode away. Thomas watched him disappear. He'll make trouble. Clara looked at him. Then we'll deal with it. We? Clara realized what she had said. Yes. That single word stayed between them. Then came the storm. Rain swept across the Arizona hills. Thomas rode out to check the cattle. Midnight came. He did not return. Clara waited. Then she saddled a horse and rode into the storm. She found Thomas beside a collapsed fence. His horse had fallen. Thomas was on the ground with blood running down his leg. Thomas! He looked up. Clara? Are you hurt? My pride. That can wait. She tore a strip from her dress and wrapped his wound. You shouldn't have come, he said. You shouldn't have stayed. He almost smiled. Together they made it. Home the next morning, Thomas sat on the porch. You saved me. You would have done the same. Yes. Then we're even. Thomas shook his head. No. Why? You came looking for me. I was worried. That means something. Clara looked away. It means you have cattle. Thomas smiled. That too. By autumn, the ranch was doing better. Clara's garden produced vegetables to sell in Tombstone. The cattle brought better prices. Eli learned to ride. The barn roof was repaired. The house received new curtains. Clara stopped thinking about leaving one evening. Thomas placed a small wooden box on the kitchen table. Inside was a silver brooch shaped like a cottonwood leaf. I can't accept this. Why? It's too much. You made this place stronger. Clara touched the brooch. My husband planted cottonwoods at our old ranch. Thomas waited. He said they meant water was near. Then perhaps it's a good symbol. For what? Thomas looked at her. Staying. Clara's eyes filled. Before she could answer, a rider came racing up the road. Thomas! He stepped onto the porch. What happened? Mercer filed a claim. For what? The eastern grazing land. Clara looked toward the pasture. Half their cattle grazed there. If he takes that land, this ranch won't survive the winter. When's the hearing? Tomorrow morning. Tombstone Courthouse. Thomas looked at Clara. You don't have to come. She shook her head. Yes, I do. Clara. You said this was my home. Thomas fell silent. She stepped closer. You gave me shelter when I had nowhere to go. Her voice softened. I won't stand by while someone takes yours. Thomas looked at her. For the first time, neither of them could pretend this was only about a job. Tomorrow, they would ride back into Tombstone. And Clara was about to discover whether the place she had come to survive had quietly become the place she belonged. Clara woke before sunrise. She dressed Eli, packed the ranch ledgers, and rode with Thomas toward Tombstone. The desert was cool beneath the morning sky. Neither spoke for several miles. Finally, Clara asked, Are you worried? Yes. About losing the ranch? Mostly. Mostly? Thomas smiled. You asked too many questions. You hired me to keep accounts. I didn't realize the job came with questions. It does. He laughed. The sound eased some of the tension between them. When they reached Tombstone, the courthouse was already crowded. Silas Mercer stood near the entrance in a clean black coat. So the widow came too. Thomas stepped forward. She works for me. Mercer smiled. Does she? Clara answered calmly. I keep the ranch books. Then perhaps you can explain why your employer is grazing cattle on my land. Thomas's expression hardened. It isn't your land. That is what the judge will decide. Inside, the hearing began. Mercer presented a deed claiming the eastern pasture. Thomas presented an older survey. The dispute centered on a boundary marker. Mercer claimed the marker had always stood in its current position. Thomas insisted it had been moved. The judge called for witnesses. Mercer's surveyor testified first. He supported Mercer. Then Thomas called Samuel Bell, an elderly rancher who had known the land for 40 years. The original marker was 300 yards farther east, Samuel said. Mercer laughed. You expect the court to trust an old man's memory? Samuel looked at him. I expect the court to trust the truth. Mercer produced another document. This statement is signed by Mr. Bell. Samuel stared at it. That ain't my writing. Your signature is there. I never signed it. Clara watched the paper. Something felt wrong. She stepped forward. Your Honor, may I see that document? Mercer objected. She has no legal standing. The judge allowed her to examine it. Clara studied the signature, then the date, then the ink. This was signed recently. Mercer laughed. And how would a widow know that? I keep books. She pointed to the signature. The ink is darker than the writing around it. The clerk examined the paper. The room became silent. The judge looked toward the surveyor. Who prepared this statement? The man hesitated. Mercer stared at him. Finally, the surveyor admitted Mercer had paid him. The judge ordered further examination. The hearing was postponed. Outside, Thomas looked at Clara. You notice that? I keep books. You may have saved the ranch. Clara smiled. You've said that before. This time I mean it more. They returned to the ranch. That night, Clara searched every page of the account ledger. She found a payment from Mercer's company to the surveyor. The payment had been made 3 weeks before the false document appeared. The next morning, she brought the evidence to court. The surveyor was questioned again. This time, he told the truth. Mercer had paid him to alter the boundary records. The false statement was exposed. The judge ruled in Thomas's favor. The eastern pasture remained part of the Reed Ranch. Outside the courthouse, Mercer approached. You think you've won? Thomas looked at him. We have. You'll regret making an enemy of me. Thomas remained calm. You were never my friend. Mercer looked at Clara. You'll learn what happens to women who interfere in men's business. Clara met his eyes. I already learned. Mercer frowned. Learned what? That being afraid doesn't mean I have to stay silent. Mercer had no answer. He walked away. Thomas watched him go. You weren't afraid. I was. You didn't look it. I've been afraid before. What changed? Clara looked toward the courthouse. I learned fear doesn't get to make every decision. They rode home together. The ranch looked different to Clara that afternoon. The same house, the same barn, the same pasture. But now she understood that it was no longer simply the place where she worked. She had defended it. She had helped rebuild it. She had protected its future. That evening, Thomas sat beside her on the porch. You know, he said, you don't have to keep proving you belong here. Clara looked at him. I wasn't trying to. Yes, you were. She smiled sadly. Maybe. Thomas reached for her hand. You belong here. Those words broke through the last wall inside her. I was afraid to believe that. I know. I thought if I called it home, I'd lose it. Thomas squeezed her hand. Then call it home when you're ready. She leaned against him. I think I'm ready. The weeks that followed were peaceful. Clara and Thomas grew closer without rushing. They worked together. They laughed. They argued about cattle prices. They discussed Eli's future. They repaired fences. They planted more vegetables. They became friends before becoming husband and wife. One afternoon, Thomas brought Clara a wooden sign. She read it. Reed and Whitmore Ranch. She looked at him. What is this? Your name belongs here. Clara stared at the sign. You mean partnership? Thomas nodded. You helped save this ranch. I only kept the books. You did much more than that. He handed her the sign. I want you to know this is your home too. Clara's eyes filled. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. She touched the letters, then smiled. It belongs here. Spring came to Arizona territory. The cattle herd grew. Clara's garden flourished. Eli became a confident rider. The house became warmer. The barn became stronger. And the ranch became known around Tombstone as a place where people could find honest work and a warm meal. When a widow came looking for employment, Clara remembered her first morning in town. When a hungry traveler arrived at the gate, Thomas remembered the 2 biscuits he had given Eli. When a frightened child stood near the barn, Eli remembered what it felt like to be new. The ranch became more than a cattle business. It became a place of belonging. Months later, Clara and Thomas married quietly in Tombstone. There was no grand ceremony. Samuel Bell stood beside Thomas. Mrs. Bell stood beside Clara. Eli carried the rings. Thomas looked at Clara. I won't promise you a life without trouble. She smiled. I wouldn't believe you. I promise you won't face it alone. Her eyes filled. That I can believe. Clara took his hand. I won't promise to forget my past. I would never ask. I won't promise I won't be afraid. You don't have to. I promise to stand beside you. Thomas smiled. That is enough. They kissed. Eli grinned. The years that followed were not perfect, but they were good. Thomas expanded the cattle herd. Clara continued keeping the books. Eli grew into a capable ranch hand. The garden expanded, the house grew, and the Reed and Whitmore Ranch became a familiar name around Tombstone. A widow could ask for work without shame. A hungry traveler could find a meal. A child could sit at their table. The ranch became a refuge because Clara remembered what it felt like to have nowhere to go. One evening, years later, Clara stood beneath the cottonwoods. Thomas came to stand beside her. "You're quiet," I was remembering. "The stagecoach?" "Yes. You were carrying that little carpet bag, and Eli had his wooden horse." Thomas smiled. "You didn't trust me. I had good reason. And now?" Clara leaned against him. "Now I know you." Thomas took her hand. "Do you?" "Most days." He laughed. "That's enough." Inside the house, Eli called that supper was ready. Clara smiled. "We're wanted." Thomas looked toward the warm light. "We are." They walked inside together. The table was full. The fire was warm. The house smelled of bread and coffee. Outside, the Arizona desert stretched beneath the darkening sky. Clara remembered the woman who had once stepped into Tombstone carrying almost nothing. That woman thought she was searching for work. She was really searching for a way to survive. Instead, she found a second chance. She found a ranch. She found a family. She found a man who never tried to control her, and she found a home she had helped build with her own hands. Thomas had not rescued Clara by taking away her independence. He gave her room to rebuild it. Clara had not simply stayed beside Thomas. She helped save his ranch. She protected its future. She became his partner. Together they learned that love in the American West did not have to arrive like thunder. Sometimes it arrived quietly. In a shared meal, a repaired fence, a child's laughter, a hand held during a difficult night, a ledger opened at the kitchen table, a promise kept. And one day, without knowing exactly when it happened, two lonely people discovered they were no longer lonely. They belonged. The desert outside Tombstone had once seemed endless to Clara. Now it looked like home. The cottonwoods moved in the evening wind. The cattle settled for the night. The porch light glowed. Inside, a family gathered around the table. Clara had lost her husband. She had lost her first ranch. She had lost her certainty about tomorrow, but she had not lost her courage. She kept walking, and that was why she found what she never expected: a second chance, a frontier family, a home. If this story kept you company, tell us in the comments where you're listening from. And if you enjoy emotional Western stories about cowboys, ranch life, widows, second chances, frontier families, and love in the American West, subscribe and ride with us again. There are always more stories waiting beyond the next dusty ridge. Until then, may your home be warm, your table be full, and the people you love always know they have a place beside you.